I fooled around and fell in love. Oh, hey everyone, and welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderly Cone, and I was just listening to the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack in preparation for our very first Metal Earth Legends build. That's right, our friends over at Metal Earth sent us two different models to review. One, Star-Lord, and the other one, Groot. In this episode, we're going to be looking at Star-Lord. Groovers, let's get down to the workbench and take a look at the package.
Groove Builders, welcome to the workbench. We have our Metal Earth Legends Star-Lord in some pretty awesome Guardians of the Galaxy packaging. And look at our Star-Lord, he looks pretty cool if you ask me. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back. On the back, we got that Metal Earth logo, followed by a really awesome Guardians of the Galaxy theming going all the way down the box. Very neat, guys. Now, just to the right of that, we have a very interesting rating right here that tells us this is about a medium difficulty. Will it be that hard? We'll find out during the build. Now, just under our Star-Lord here, we have a very interesting QR code that we can scan to get a 360 view of our model if we need it while we're building. Now, just below that, we have some brief instructions on how to build our model, but we'll go into more detail about that during our build. Alright, Groove Builders, let's go ahead and open up our package. We have our instructions, and we have our metal, and it looks like 1 1/4 sheet. Very interesting. Alright, Groovers, let's get building. Groovers, it's time for us to start building, so grab your metal and your cutters just like myself here and begin to cut out your first couple of pieces. Now right away, you're going to notice that this metal is not like any other metal that we've built with before. No, this is that very unique Legends metal that has a very unique matte finish on it if you're looking very closely, and you'll also notice that when you're bending this metal and trying to form the different pieces, that the color stays on pretty good. With other models out there, especially ones not from Metal Earth, the color comes off really easy. That being said though, if you Groovers remember back to building our TARDIS, it actually had some paint on it that would come off pretty easily if you weren't careful. So the team over at Metal Earth definitely nailed this particular paint job. So with that being all said, Groovers, I know that there might be some new builders out there, so I think it's very important that we look at the instructions together. R2? Thanks, buddy. Alright, starting at the top, we have that brand new Metal Earth Legends logo, and just to the left, we have a really nice depiction of our Star-Lord model. Very cool. Now, just to the right of that, we have two different diagrams, which are very important. These are our parts diagram, and I always recommend taking your metal out of the package and orientating it to these two diagrams on this page. This will make it a lot easier for you to be able to identify pieces and cut them out when you need them. Now, just below our parts diagrams and to the left, we have a very important picture. This picture shows us what our fold lines, insertion holes, and insertion tabs look like. Now, this is a very important piece because this is the fundamentals of metal model building. You need to take the metal and bend it along the fold lines. The insertion holes are very important because that's where the tabs are going to go when you're connecting two or more pieces together. Now, just to the right, we have two very important symbols that we're going to see scattered throughout all of our directions. That, of course, is our circles and our triangles. Now, they mean two very different things, but both are very important. When we see a circle, you want to take as much of the tab in your tweezers as possible and then bend it flush with your piece 90 degrees. When you see a triangle, you want to take as much of the tab in your tweezers as possible and twist it 90 degrees. I definitely recommend following these two symbols throughout your instructions to build your model, and then at the end, going over your model and seeing if there's any tabs you might be able to hide or twist to make a little bit better. Groovers, always follow the instructions first and then go over your models at the end. Underneath our circle and triangle, we have the all-important QR code, which we can scan to get a 360 view of our model if we need it while we're building. Now, Groovers, this can come in handy with different bits of detail work on a model, and it can also help us figure out how certain pieces are positioned. Maybe not necessarily with this particular model, but definitely with other metal models in the series. Then finally, we have our Oh, I guess we don't have a tool section. Very interesting. Groovers, I definitely recommend a few tools, not just for this particular build, but for metal model builds in general. Now, if you're just starting out metal model building, I definitely recommend a very good pair of wire cutters, and that's to cut out all of your pieces. Don't sit there trying to bend all the pieces out. You're going to end up making them very weak and they might break on you, which is never a fun thing to have happen to you. Once you have a good pair of wire cutters, the next thing you're going to need is a really good set of tweezers. Now, there are a plethora of detailed tweezers available to you online, but your mom, sister, or even the ones inside the medicine cabinet will work just fine for this particular build. And with that, Groove Builders, we've summed up our instructions for the Metal Earth Legends Star-Lord model. Pretty simple and straightforward if you ask me. What do you think, R2? That's what I thought, but you know something not as straightforward? Star-Lord's origin story. At the time of recording this video, I think there's about 3 different ones. Originally, Star-Lord, or Peter Quill, was an astronaut who becomes a space cop, but that was scrapped a little bit later on and rethought to have Star-Lord growing up with a gang of pirates known as the Ravengers before becoming the infamous Star-Lord. Lastly, we have the kinda hybrid movie version, which brings together elements of both stories and changes his dad almost completely. Regardless of what origin story you like the most, what's important to know is that Star-Lord is the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy and he fights to defend it, while getting in some really awesome dance moves.
Hey Groovers, and welcome back! We built our Metal Earth Legends Star-Lord, and I must say, I had a lot of fun building this little guy. Let's talk about it a little bit more in construction. My first point when it comes to building my friend Star-Lord here is that there's only about 13 parts in total for us to be able to put this guy together, which is really nice, especially if it's your first model. There's really not a whole lot of complicated pieces to form here, and if you take the time, you really shouldn't have a whole lot of issue. My second point is a word of caution for part number 3. While not necessarily difficult, it is easy to mistake which tabs are supposed to go where with this particular part. I recommend taking part 3 and placing it into Star-Lord's hand, and then double checking to make sure the tabs are in the proper spot before connecting them. The last thing you want to do is take one of these tabs and accidentally break one, because then you're going to have to replace the part. My third point is something that we touched on during the build, but I definitely want to reiterate, and that is the color on this model is done very well. You can bend the pieces and grab the different tabs with your tweezers and not have to worry about the paint coming off, which for most other metal models out there is a big concern. So high five to the Metal Earth team out there for figuring out a good way to put color on these models. And I'm very interested to see what other models they're going to do in the future with this kind of color. And with that being said, Groove Builders, let's move on to build time. Okay Groovers, I'm not gonna lie, Star-Lord only took me about 35 minutes to build, and I think that's gonna be about average for most model builders out there. At the end of the day, it's always best to invest more time so that you have a better model at the end than rushing through it and coming out with something that's less than great. And finally, Groove Builders, my thoughts. Ever since I started seeing the Metal Earth Legends collection advertised, I was interested in seeing what they were going to put out. And I'll be completely honest, at first I was kind of deterred from even touching the series, just because they didn't really seem like the metal models that I'm used to building. I mean, let's take a look at this guy for a moment. What does he actually remind you of? To me, he kind of reminds me of one of these guys, these little pop figures, especially because of the eyes and just kind of how they're built. Which, as most of you people know out there, the pop figures are pretty popular, and if that's what the Metal Earth guys are trying to do, I think they may be barking up the right tree to do it. The one red flag problem I have with these models is that I'm kind of afraid that Metal Earth will shy away from some of the more difficult models. Let's take the Guardian of the Galaxies here and look at Star-Lord. Star-Lord is a pretty cool figure in the comic books and the movie series, and this model looks pretty good, but when you look at something like my Iron Man here, and you look at the detail on him versus the detail on Star-Lord, I mean, they're not even comparable. Now, I understand the guys at Metal Earth are not making this model to be comparable with this model, but when looking at the Star-Lord model and holding my Iron Man here, I almost feel like they might be missing out on a really awesome opportunity to be able to have some nice models built from the Guardians of the Galaxy line in similar fashions to my friend Iron Man here. I mean, could you imagine a Star-Lord like this? That would be so awesome! Alright, Groove Builders, that brings us to the end of our show. I had a really good time building the Middle-earth Legend Star-Lord with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of really cool content coming out in the future. Until next time, Groove Builders, keep building! Now, I gotta find a place to put my Star-Lord friend here away from the jukebox.